Hello and welcome to this month's drawing tutorial. This month we're going to draw something a little bit more complicated. We have a little girl here, and not only is she wearing some fancy jewelry, but her head is at a tilt. So the first step is to crop in your reference material to make it the best composition you can. I'm going to ignore these background elements and just draw her and her hand and jewelry. Next, give yourself some measured marks to divide the picture into a semi-grid on all sides. So here I have A, B, and C on top and bottom, and 1, 2, and 3 on the side. Give yourself as many marks around the outside as you need. You're going to use those grid marks when you're laying out the initial drawing in the next phase. On your drawing paper, you need to start with a frame that has the same proportions as your reference material. And then you're going to translate the A, B, C, and 1, 2, 3 marks that you have on your reference material to your drawing paper. Those are going to be incredibly helpful, not only for enlarging your reference material, but also in laying out the drawing accurately. Because now what I do is to begin sketching the drawing's largest shapes. And I'm going to lay those in terms of my grid marks. So for instance, the chin winds up just a little bit below point 2 here, and this ear extends to point B. The side of the jaw is going to extend vertically a little bit past point B. So with those two marks in mind, here's my point 2, here's my point B, so I know that the face is going to be somewhere around here, and I can begin sketching that in. I want to get those angles correct, and so I can do that really accurately by using a straight edge, either my pencil or a ruler, laying it along the side of the face to get an accurate idea of that angle of the triangle. See, it's going to bisect the paper between B and C here, and about a quarter of the way down from 1 here. So a quarter of the way down from 1 is going to be here, and between B and C, that's going to be about here. So then I can just quickly put a line and see if that angle matches what I eyeballed. So as often as possible, I'm going to use the intersection of that grid on the outside of the picture to place those large shapes perfectly. And then once I have some of my lines precise, I can place the ones that don't have exact guide points to line up with more accurately. Okay, so here's the side of her face, lining up with point B. Here's her ear. The bottom of the ear is right around point 1. And so this is how I can go about putting in the face. See how quickly you can move because you have those guidelines to refer to. So it's going to look like kind of a mess, but kind of briefly sketched in there. And then you can get your kneaded eraser and go back and start making things more exact. And I'm going to right away develop the angle of the face. So this is the line that goes through. The eye line is still in the center of the head, but the angle at the bottom of the eyes is going to bisect right there. As you lay out the large shapes of your drawing, make sure that you're always paying attention to these outside grid marks. Those will help you with accuracy. And then refine the shapes by erasing your messy lines and then redrawing them more cleanly. But even those clean lines, I want you to keep nice and light, because until the entire face is done, you won't know if you're done making adjustments or not. Every face is different, and in order to catch the unique qualities that make each face different, you have to really pay attention to the individual attributes that each person has. So don't count on the formulas that you've memorized for proportions. Make sure that you make new measurements for her so that you get her proportions correct. Alright, so you see how I go back into my rough sketch and I fine-tune it, and then I'm going to fine-tune it some more, following the same exact process until I'm satisfied that everything on the face, every outline of every feature, looks correct in itself and looks correct with respect to the entire face. Okay, so let me take a little bit of time off camera now. I'm just going to be cleaning up the lines, following the same process, redrawing my sketch lines, and making sure that everything looks correct. Then I'll come back to you and I'll show you how to fill in the tone. This is the drawing after I've worked up the lines and cleaned things up a bit. So when I compare my drawing to the photo reference, it's looking pretty good. Keep your photo reference close to the drawing and then quickly look back and forth between the two and see if anything seems off. Look at the drawing not only flat down, but vertically as well, the way that it would look if it were on the wall. You'll avoid a lot of missteps that way. The difference between a good drawing and an excellent drawing is always going to be in the extra time that you take at this stage. And I'm going to erase as many lines as I can because lines are your enemy in drawing. You want to make the appearance of lines in contrasts of light and dark, but you don't want to draw the features as outlines, otherwise your drawing is going to start looking like a coloring book. And in places like this on the arm, I'm going to erase the sketchy marks that I have drawn and replace them with one clean line, keeping it light. When you're satisfied with the lines, then I'd recommend grabbing a 2 or 3H and starting to place the tone. To develop small little highlights and flyaway hairs, you can use a stylus, which is actually a clay tool, and indent the paper here and there, showing the direction of the hair growth. That's going to add just a little bit more realism. Then use the pencil on the side, hold it at the very end, and then make smooth back and forth strokes to fill in the tone of all of the flesh. I'm going to go over the face, only avoiding the eyes, the hands, the arms, any other flesh that is visible in your picture. Now take your time and don't go too quickly, and always add the tone in the same direction. You're going to need to use nice even pressure to make sure that the face doesn't look scribbled on or have some lines that are darker than others. Now when you've filled in all of the tone and your first pass of the flesh tone is done, then you're going to need to blend it smooth. And to do that, for the skin tone, I prefer to use a chamois cloth. This is a chamois cloth, and you can buy it at most art stores, certainly online. If you don't have one or you can't find one, go ahead and use the second best thing, which is a plain white tissue. Then, whether you're using a chamois or the tissue, you need to wrap it around your finger so that it's nice and smooth right on the tip. And then you're going to use small circle strokes and blend that skin tone nice and smooth. So just use your kneaded eraser, smash it into a blade, and clean up any and all smudges. Now for a second step, I'm still working on just the flesh tone, but I'm adding some emphasis in the darker areas of the skin. So wherever I see some darker shadow shapes, I'm going to go back in with my 4H or my 2H pencil, and I'm going to add some subtle shadows wherever I see fit. I'm using the same technique, but instead of going over everything, I'm working in select areas. However, I am not working up one feature to completion and then moving on to the next. Always work with the entire face as a whole and push up everything together, because adding the contrast is going to affect the shape. Now the face curves like a ball, and so what you generally get is a shadow on the cheek and then a little line of reflected highlight on the very edge. So as you add some shadows, keep that reflected light a little bit lighter, and that will add to the realism of your drawing. Where you see lines on the face, especially when you're drawing children, don't draw those as lines. Make short back and forth strokes like this and start to suggest a line by adding a little bit of shadow. Also, as you're working on this step, squint and see the shapes that go over the entire face. Don't stop shading at one feature and then move to the next, or even think of them as separate features. You're looking at the face and you're seeing the complex shadow that moves over everything. So I go straight from the nose, and without picking up my pencil, I'm moving into the eye because it's part of the same shadow shape. You gradually darken it up, then you blend and you darken it up, then you blend and you darken it up until you're finished. Now when you're done with this pass, don't blend with a chamois cloth or with a tissue. This time you need something that's going to give you more precision. I want to use a tortillon or stomp. Always use the largest one that you can for the area because it will give you the most realistic finish. And then I'm going to use the stomp, not with circle strokes so much, but the same way that I put in the shadows initially with a pencil. So I'm going back and forth smoothly, and I'm following the contours of the face. And here I can start to see some of those indented lines popping out. And of course I'm going to have to use multiple passes to darken everything up as much as it needs for the finished drawing. But I gradually work it up in layers, just like this. After you've blended for the second time, then you can start to add some details to the features using a slightly darker pencil. So this is an HB pencil. I'm going to use a piece of sandpaper to sharpen the tip, and I'm going to start by darkening up the lines in the eyes. I just use my pencil and I'm going to darken up the line of the eyelash, add some more detail around the iris, and begin darkening the pupil. But I'm not going to make that pupil as dark as it's going to be at the very end, because I still want to be able to make changes. Down here you can see part of the inside of the lower lid as well as the outside. There's a little bit of shading that makes the eyeball look rounded, and then I can add some spokes inside the iris and a little bit of tone. I'll do similar work in the nostril and just bring out that nose a little bit. Always err on the side of less line, less outlining, and the lines are less dark. So let me go off camera a little bit and work up the rest of the features. Then I'll come back and we'll push it forward again. Here's the drawing after the second pass. When that pass is done, then all that remains is to repeat that same exact process as many times as you need to finish up the drawing. You're just gradually building it up, and every time you finish a pass of shading and blending, you're adding one more notch to the realism. So now that I've added some tone to the eyes, step 2 is to blend that tone. I'm going to do that using a little stomp. So I can blend under the nose here, blend up the side, and blend in the darks. Now let's work a little bit on the hair. So to put the hair in, I'm using an HB pencil, and I'm just starting by developing some of those large shadow shapes on the hair. I'm developing them using a pencil on the side and following the strokes of the hair in the direction of the hair growth that I see on the page. So the hair growth comes down like this and comes over the ear. And here, some of it is tucked up and some of it is coming down this way. So I'm not putting in any strokes that are going to fight the realism of the hair growth. After that's done, you can use a brush or a stomp or a chamois cloth and fill in some of that tone a little bit better. But then I'm going to go back with my pencil and I'm going to develop some of those tiny hairs once again. I'm also going to start to fill in some of the shapes of this crown, and I'm working at the hair at the same time. I'll do similar work in the clothing by darkening up areas like the collar here where it's black. I'll have to work around those little pearl shapes. Don't start by making it as dark as you can. Just put down some sort of base tone the same way that you did in the face. Blend that smooth, working up all of the clothing at once, and then go back and darken it a second or third time as needed. And I want to get at least a base tone on the clothing before I finish the face, because the clothes are going to impact the face as well. And then when you're sure that the face is exactly the way you want it to be, you're going to go in with a 4B pencil and you're going to put in the finishing touches everywhere that needs to go a little bit darker. But be careful, you don't want to make everything a big black outline. Okay, so you're going to add some darks, and you're going to do that carefully, making sure that you blend out your lines as soon as you put them down so that you get strong contrasts without a strong outline element, just like this. I put down my darks and I immediately blend them out. So now we're at the last phase of the drawing, where it's just a matter of putting in the time to work up those darks the way that they need to look, and to add the finicky little details in the crown and the clothing. The last thing we'll do before I leave and finish this up off camera is add some details to the lips. So I'm going to strengthen the line between the two lips with a 4B pencil, and then add some little spokes in the lower lip. After adding those spokes, blend the corners of the mouth, and then carefully come up and add some tone in the middle part. And the dark lip is usually a little bit darker than the lower lip. And then if you need to strengthen the highlight more, pull it out with a kneaded eraser and just make a small little white spot. Do that same sort of thing on the tip of the nose and anywhere else that you see a bright highlight. Maybe in the corners of the eyes, maybe on the nostrils, maybe a little bit on the bridge of the nose. If your highlight gets a little bit too sharp, soften it up with a blending tool. So let me go off camera again now and do some more work, just doing the same things that I've already shown you. Then I'll come back again and show you the progress. Here's how the face is coming along after I've done some more rendering. So you can see that the realism has been pushed up quite a bit. What we need to spend time on now are the other little details, the crown, the clothing, the bracelet. So I'm going to take some time and show you how I go about putting in those sorts of details. Let's start on the crown. It's a little rhinestone crown, so what you see are some strong outlines where the very straight edge of that plastic or metal is butting up against her hair. So I'm going to strengthen that edge with a broken line and then start to put in the shadow shapes that I see in the crown. So along the top edge here there are some dark shadows, and then for the rest of those little jewels, the light is catching the jewels and making a shadow on one side. So I'm going to focus on the shadow edge, and then I'm going to stipple in the shadows around some of those other little jewels. Stippling is just bouncing the pencil up and down and making a series of dots. And then around the hair and these edges too, I see some broken shapes where the jewels are poking out on the top ridge. You can also lay in some of those shadow shapes really quickly just using the tip of your dirty stomp. So up here I can put in a base tone of gray using the dirty stomp, and then pull out some dark shadow shapes around those rhinestones as a second step. And as a third step, pull out highlights with a kneaded eraser. So with the combination of stippling and adding base tone and then shadow shapes and pulling out details with a kneaded eraser, I'm going to finish this crown up off camera. But let's move down now and look at the clothing. So I'm going to first give myself some guidelines for how the fabric is bending. Once those lines are in place, I'm going to start to add some tone around those wrinkle shapes. Once I have the base tone here, I'm going to use a large stomp and I'm going to blend it smooth. Just make sure that your blending motions are smooth and even. So you're not scribbling, you're blending together what you have there already. And then since this is a satiny fabric, the highlights are really sharp, so you might need to go back and erase around the edges of anything that looks a little bit too obscure. Then I'll just have to go back, really darken up these polka dots and see what the shadows on the satin look like from there. Then last but not least, I'm going to be working on the bracelet. The bracelet I'm going to do really quickly using a dirty stomp. I'm going to go around each little pearl here to add some shadows. I'm going to leave a little spot on each pearl that will read as a highlight. And then I'm going to strengthen the shadow using a darker pencil. So this is the last time I'm going to go off camera. I'm just going to be darkening up the blacks and darkening up the shadows. I'll come back to you with a finished portrait so you can see exactly where those techniques can get you. After some final rendering, this is the finished portrait that I've come up with. There's the bottom and the top. So you can see what adding those intense darks can really do to make the portrait pop. When those are in place and you've added some finishing details to the man-made objects like the pearls and the tiara, then I would recommend putting the drawing away for a couple of days, getting it out and viewing it with fresh eyes, this time pinned up to a wall so you can see how it looks vertically from different distances away. If you want, you can go forward and draw the exact same picture that I did because you should have the file. And if you would like to draw a different person, then in order to make the most of what you learned in today's tutorial, just make sure that you're drawing a portrait with a tilted face, and all of those rules that we learned will still apply. So use the outer grid to place the large shapes. When the large shapes are accurate, then you start placing the interior features using that measuring system in terms of eye length. Just transfer your measurements from the reference photo to your drawing, and if you take time and you're diligent, you should be able to come up with something really fantastic. So that concludes this month's drawing tutorial. I hope you've learned something that you can take away with you to the studio. As usual, I thank you so much for watching.